All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. This is the fourth installment of the RSCK EdTV series, and we are talking today about business etiquette, specifically working with the public. And joining me today for this discussion is Sue Wenger, who's with the Wenger Derby office, and Rob Pestinger with Coldwell Banker. And I'm Cathy Erickson with Wenger also. And we'll just go ahead and get started. So one of our first questions is, when you meet a customer, what are some of the very first things that you do when you meet a new customer? Sue?
The first thing I do is show up. And I would encourage everyone to do just that. Show up. Be on time. Be prepared for the task at hand. Whether you're listing, whether you're showing, be prepared, and then be focused. So there are several firsts that come under show up, as far as I'm concerned. Those customer service items that you do will determine your value and also prolong your business.
Mm-hmm. Rob?
Well, one of the first things I do, it varies from buyer or seller. So if I'm working with a buyer, I like the conversation to be more 50% from the buyer. So I'll basically open up and have open-ended questions, trying to find out what their goals are, what they want to do, and let them talk a little bit more. And then I just listen to them is the main thing. And take notes along the way, because if I'm going to be doing a search, I want to make sure I'm doing the proper search for them. And then I will eventually get into a conversation about agency, because I think they need to know what my role can be as a buyer's agent, a seller's agent, or a transaction broker, and how I get paid. I think that's important for the public to know that. However, that's not my priority in getting that out first. I really want to put them in front and get information from them. Now, that I'd like to see over 50% of the conversation actually being from the buyer. Now, if I'm working with the seller, going to a listing appointment, then really I'm out asking them to give me a tour of the house and follow them around, listen to them, ask them, why they're selling, learning a little bit more, they're relocating, they're wanting to move up, what the situation is. And then after we're through that, I'll go through my listing presentation, but I generally ask them up front, what do you want me to answer for you today? Because I want to make sure I address all your questions instead of me just rambling and going into a spiel type of thing. So I keep it pretty relaxed, pretty open-ended, and eventually we get into the agency discussion a little bit more at that time.
Mm-hmm. Sue, do you do the same thing as far as agency? Do you talk about that with new people in your first meeting?
Normally in the first meeting, it depends on how much time we have, if we're looking at one house or six with buyers, or with listing presentation, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Very important.
It's not that I dwell on it, and I don't know if Sue does this, but we have a buyer's notebook that we give them. Maybe it's a little bit old school, but it's in print. So
because it's a hard copy?
Because it's a hard copy. It actually is a hard copy.
You don't have a thumb drive you hand them?
No, I probably should. But in that, it talks about agency, what we can do, if they find a house for sale by owner, that type of thing. And it goes into more detail and actually has the agency agreement in it. And, I say, at your leisure, you may want to take time to look at this. But I never have my buyers sign a contract up front, because they really don't know me that well yet, and they need to get to know me.
Right.
And when the timing is right, then I'd like for them to review it and sign the agreement.
Right. And you don't know them yet?
No, I don't know them yet. It is a two-way street, because, I know there's some agents who are just wanting to get a commission, but boy, you can pay a price for that commission.
Yes.
So you need to make sure it's the type of the person that you can work with and work with well and communicate. I think that's really the main thing. If you really can't have good communication with somebody, you may be asking for trouble along the way later in the transaction and regret it.
I remember when I went through my training, and one of the things that they stressed was in that first meeting, clarify that. How do you like to communicate? Because as we know today, there's so many ways that you can communicate, but if you're not communicating in a way that your client can receive information, you're talking to the wall, or you're texting the wall, or you're, emailing the wall, but it's not getting through. So, and that to me is so important. Is how do you want to receive information?
That's part of the engagement period, before the marriage with the buyer agency, seller agency.
Right.
Our next question is about open houses, and you're at an open house and it's kind of like I always say it's kind of like a garage sale, because no one comes and then they all come together as a group, So how do you handle that when you've got multiple people coming through an open house? How do you pay attention and make each person through the open house feel special, greet them, that type of thing?
I just encountered this last weekend, and typically when you have an open house in College Hill or Crown Heights, you can plan on a mass of people arriving. And so you need to be prepared for that. And what I normally do is I greet the people as they enter. I give them information, a flyer on the house. I might say a few positive things about the house, and then ask them to sign in on a registration form. Not all people do, but some people will. And that I'd like to get their impression of the house after they had a chance to go through it. Now, if it gets too crowded, you can't always circle back up, but I do try to make that effort.
Each one of us has a different way of doing open houses, and I think the greatest thing we can do is have a plan. How is it if we're going to sit there for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon and not see anyone? What do we do? On the other hand, like Rob says, if we're in College Hill or Derby or wherever, and we have a hassle of people coming through the front door, plan how you're going to do that. Greet them, absolutely. Ask for information. And you're right, some don't want to give that out. And then some of the features of the house, if you have information you want to give them, give them. If you see a line down the sidewalk, explain to the people coming through the door one at a time that you're more than welcome to view the house. If you have questions, you'll try to make yourself available, but we want to make sure everyone goes through and has as much information as they need. Some will spend 2 minutes and some will spend 40. So it's difficult to gauge.
In my particular situation, my wife Shirley and I are partners. So if it's...
And good partners too, may I add?
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And there are times where both of us will go to the open house, especially if there's a basement there, and especially if there's items of value within the house. I think just having the extra set of eyes and ears is a benefit. It's not that we do that all the time, but there are occasions that we do that.
So when you do that, does one person stay by the door and the other person is kind of roaming through the house, checking on all of the people that are going through, or do you just decide, okay, I'm going to be here and you're going to be there, and those are our stations, and that's where, do you have a...
Well, generally, if there's multiple levels, we'll each stay on a certain level.
Okay.
And handle it that way. So I don't recall Shirley ever roaming around, or me ever roaming around a whole lot. But it also gives you an opportunity to talk to the people a little bit more also when you have to there. But it's a benefit for us because we're a team. Now, if another agent has a partner they work with, then they could do that. It's just unique for our situation, I guess.
Yeah. But I think sometimes you're right. Sometimes the property does warrant having 2 people if it's large enough, or like you said, just sometimes that extra coverage is very helpful.
Right.
Yeah. How much do you think it matters that you are timely in responses, both to email, phone, text, appointments, all of that in today's market, because we're dealing with different generations? Do you find, how important is that? And do you find it's any different dealing with boomers versus millennials, or does it matter? Or is there one golden rule and that's it?
One golden rule is do what you say you'll do, and it's very important that you communicate. You said that. The faster we spin, it seems like the less attention we pay to the little things that might prolong our business. People have to know that we take our business seriously, that they're not just a bleep on our radar screen and you put your best foot forward. You mentioned the generational thing, the advanced generation, of which I may be becoming a part of here one of these days. Timeliness is very important to them. Being courteous, being respectful, very important to them. As opposed to, probably, the younger generations, they want instant everything. I need an answer now, and if you can't give it to me, I may go somewhere else. So, knowing your customer, knowing your client, very important to know how to communicate with them, just like you said a while ago.
I completely agree with what Sue has said. In the younger generation, they do want instant information. And generally it's in the form of a text. And so I make a point to text as soon as I can. And I know there are some agents who say, I'm going to block out a certain time period each day. I'm going to do my prospecting for this time period. Then I'm going to work on existing transactions, I'll return calls and text messages. I don't operate that way. I just respond as quickly as I can. If I can't get back with them, I will send them just a short text. So I'll get back with you shortly. And if it takes a little bit more time to research, I'll say, I need to look into this, and I'll get back with you later. That way they know that you are paying attention to them.
Right.
Now, they're a little bit older generation. They'd rather have a phone conversation, and they'd rather talk things through, which frankly I kind of prefer.
Or face-to-face
Or
meeting.
face-to-face meetings. And you get the back and forth. You know what they're thinking. Whereas on the text message, you don't know what the individual's always thinking. And the same thing with emails. I mean, I like emails because you can document things along the way and save it in a file. But if a lot of times people only read the first part of an email, and they don't get the complete message.
Yeah. You run the risk of more miscommunication that way.
Right. I think that's a risk that we run at times with some younger people, quite frankly.
Yeah, I agree.
You do spin a lot. You do. Another important thing too, when responding, and I do, like Rob does, respond as quickly as I can. If you can't, sometimes you have to take a big gulp, and you have to then get back to them and say, I am so sorry. That's probably the most humbling part of our job, having to admit that we can make mistakes and hope that they understand that we can make mistakes, and that we're not always like that, right?
Right. And I think that responsiveness can differentiate yourself from other agents.
Yeah, I
too.
agree.
I mean, we are crowded with agents. There's just no doubt about it. I don't know how many there are now. I imagine a couple thousand.
Not quite,
So,
but
not
close.
quite. But we're getting close there. And I'm astounded when I might call an agent after 7 o'clock at night and I get a voicemail message. I do not take calls after 7 o'clock at night. I will return your calls tomorrow morning. I'm thinking, okay, well, that's good. If your client's calling, then
If that works for your business.
if it works.
Yeah.
And maybe it does for them. And maybe I just feel like I need to be connected at all times. I mean, you do need a break. There's no doubt. You could do this business every moment of your day if you wanted to. But if it's definitely something that's important to that client, I'm going to be responding to them regardless of the time.
Yeah.
I did that the other night about 10:45. Not responded, but sent a text message. And I got a response the next morning that said, we go to bed about 8:30. So I thought, well, I won't get that one again.
Duly noted.
Duly noted.
Exactly.
That's fine.
I usually tell people I will respond to you right away unless my eyes are closed.
Yeah.
In which case it will be when my eyes open, and then I'll respond, and that could be a Sunday afternoon nap if I'm not working an open house. But Let's talk about appearance. How important is it, do you think, that we dress professionally? And, you know, what does that mean for the public these days? Because I think that's changed a lot. And I see, as I'm sure you do, a little bit of everything.
You do see a little bit of everything. I see it in our office occasionally. You folks must
Well,
see it in your office. I guess, you know, I don't know if this is important to the public anymore, but there is a percentage of the public where it is important. And I don't have the crystal ball. I can't tell when it's going to be important or not important, especially if I don't know the people at all. So I mean, it's not like I wear a suit coat or anything of that nature, slacks and a collared shirt type of attire. And it's just, you know, you give that first impression that you're not in this as a hobby, you're
Right.
in this as a profession.
You're serious.
And that yes, exactly.
This is your
You're
job.
serious, and that you're going to look after their interest in representing them. I think it sends that nonverbal message to them. Now, after you've shown them 15, 20 houses, hopefully you don't show them that
70,
many.
75.
Exactly. I mean, you're developing a relationship with them more and more. And sure, maybe it's a weekend, you want to dress down a little bit, you just explain to them this weekend, that's fine, you can get away with it. But for first impressions, I think it's important to dress professionally.
What you wear, how you act, what you say, it's all a part of who you are. So you have to think about, where am I going, what am I doing, what is it I want them to see about me, and then dress appropriately after that. Like you said, setting yourself apart from the competition. But it's, you know, if their clients or customers are okay with that, that's quite all right. It is a different ballgame. The other thing is, it's not just the customers or clients we present ourselves to. It's the loan officers, it's the termite inspectors, it's the home inspectors, it's everyone who has a part of our transactions. How do we come across, what is it that says to them, we know what we're doing, we're serious about what we're doing, and we'll do a good job.
I think it'd be interesting to pose that question to a younger agent and see how they would respond to it. Because obviously you're talking to two a little bit older agents here.
What?
Yes.
Speak for yourself, Rob.
Okay. And it may be
Yeah.
the impression of some younger people, maybe they're just not up with the times.
Well, I was going to say, you know, whenever I'm meeting with someone for the very first time, and they're a referral, I don't know them, they've been sent to me by someone I do know, I probably dress up a little bit more for that first meeting because I want to show my respect for them. They're asking me to come into their world and do something for them, and I want to show that I respect that they have asked me to meet with them. Now, after we develop that relationship, after 20 houses or whatever, and they're showing up in shorts and t-shirts every single time we go out to look at houses, I might make some adjustments in my wardrobe so that they feel more comfortable. Because if I'm showing up in a dress and heels, and I know they're going to be in jeans and t-shirts, I'm going to try to make them feel more comfortable. Does that make sense?
It does,
and so you kind of have to meet your clients where they are, but still remain professional.
And it's harder to gauge, I think, now because we have multiple places, a variety of places where people spend their work days. Many people work from home. Many people don't go to an office like you and I grew up in. So it is different. It's a different way of thinking about things. So I don't have answers, but if you find that young person who will answer.
Yes. Well, I agree with what you're saying, and I think it is a matter of making them feel comfortable.
Right.
Also.
At whatever
So-
level they are.
Right, and we adjust.
We adjust. We're a little bit of a chameleon.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of have to go with whatever. So, yeah. So you talked about that relationship building, and our next question is that we often do become great friends with our clients after maybe a protracted time period of looking for a house or selling a house. How do you maintain that balance of friendship and the business relationship going forward after the transaction is over? What do you have? Do you have certain things that you do with clients after the transaction is closed, just on kind of on a standard basis, or does it matter how close you've become, or maybe you never want to see them again?
Well, it's my turn or your turn?
Go ahead.
I've had one of those.
Well, we do, but if you're going to stay in this business for a long time period, you need to stay in contact with your prior clients because they may be referral sources everybody knows, or they may have a need going forward in the future. I'm pretty much the same person in dealing with people, whether it's buying and selling a house or just in relationships. I'm friendly with them. I'm courteous, I'm kind, respectful. I'm more of a private person. It maybe is a little bit different for a woman. I know my wife, she can talk about more things than I can, especially with women. I won't even venture places that she might go with some questions. And but with some of the clients, I do take them to lunch every now and then and discuss things, and we do phone calls periodically with them. If they're good friends and they haven't been clients, we want them to know that we're in the real estate business. We don't send them as much information as we do past clients, but enough for that they know that we're active and in the business. Whereas the past clients, we do spend a lot of time and effort in staying in contact with them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I answered your question. I just don't get into political or social conversations a whole lot unless they're an extremely good friend. I just stay away from that.
It's safe. Mm-hmm.
So your follow-up after a closing, do you put them on a mailing list? Do you have the birthdays and names of all their children? Do you do all of that? Because I know some who do, and I haven't been one who's done that. I have a list of people to whom I've sent things for 20 years, and we're on the third and almost fourth generation of some of those first ones, so those follow-ups are important. But, and I'm not sure about your community, but my smaller community sometimes just takes over. So it's, I've got great-grandparents and grandparents and parents and children now. So it's a little bit different, but staying in touch and communicate in whatever way is most comfortable is the way you'll have longevity.
I agree.
I don't know so much about it, and there are all kinds of ways to do that. Whether you do paper or whether you do texting forever and a day, I don't know.
Yeah. So let's discuss the importance of returning calls, emails, and text in a timely fashion. We touched on that a little bit, but is there a, I heard a statistic when I first got in the business a few years ago about if you don't return a phone call within 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I forget, it was a very short time period, that person that's calling you, if they're looking for an agent, they'll call someone else. And so they really, really drove home the point of the immediacy of returning phone calls, text, emails, things like that. What's your take on that, Sue?
I don't think it really has changed. You still have the people who expect an immediate response, and I do that to the best of my ability. But there are times when it just cannot be done. Again, I think it depends on generations. The older people who like face-to-face and phone calls are the ones who will wait for you and expect that you will have, there's a really good reason that you haven't gotten back to them in 10 minutes. Difference in persons, all my daughter's ages, I'm sad to say. They expect you to respond 10 minutes. They may find someone else, but you hope they'll come back to you eventually because of how good you are, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, I'd just be repeating everything that we said
Yes.
so far.
Well, I think sometimes in a transaction too, there are certain times through a transaction when timing is much more critical than others, wouldn't you say?
There is, and it depends upon what has taken place.
Right.
And then you need to keep in mind what your clients are doing at that point in time and day. It may be you're working with a couple that has a napping child. Well, I usually don't want to disturb anybody because my daughter has a child and I know how important her time is to her during that little block, and definitely wouldn't call to disturb anybody. Or somebody's working and I feel like it'd be an interruption. I might just text back and say, give me a call. We need to actually discuss this item. It's not a text or an email message. So we need to have a phone conversation. So you call me at your convenience.
And I think that's a lot of us being able to read and have respect for exactly what you said, respect for the persons in our life, our clients and our customers.
Don't you feel like in every relationship that you have with clients, after a short time, you kind of get a sense of their ebb and flow and kind of, like you're saying, their routine and you know, I've got clients that I can send them everything all day long, but I know they're not going to call me or respond to me until after they get off work.
Right.
And so you really do develop that kind of that symbiotic relationship almost, where you're in sync with their schedules, but then you have to be in sync with everybody's schedules, and you have to keep them all straight. So.
And send the correct message to the correct person. Yes.
Really?
Yes.
There are some people who are decision makers and some people aren't, but
That's right.
and then again, you have to learn that. I mean, I'll err on sending to two people in a transaction.
Right.
And until I get the impression, or that they tell me that really he or she doesn't want to be bothered, I'm going to be the person that takes care of this.
I just did that with a husband and wife, and he's the one that's been having most of the direct communication with me, and then all of a sudden I'd call him or text him and she would call me back, and I'm like,
Sent you a message.
okay,
didn't I?
we've got a new thing going on here. She's now the one that's kind of taken over, but you
Yes.
have to pay attention to those clues, because
Exactly.
they're giving you the clues, and if you're not paying attention,
You've got to be a little intuitive and read.
you do.
You just can't
If you
do
keep
things
calling
your
the
own
same
way.
number and it keeps coming back from another number, hello, yeah. We talked about the professional image. Let's talk for a little bit about respecting cultural diversity. This is so paramount, I think, in everyone's mind right now. So, any thoughts about that?
Well, the
How-
timing is perfect, I guess, with Virginia
Yeah.
to discuss this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, culture diversity, and we're becoming more and more diverse, number one. I mean, if you just look at our schools and in our different communities, if you're in western Kansas, in Garden City or somewhere, I'm sure that the non-white population has probably overtaken the white population.
Mm-hmm.
They're the majority, so to speak. And so we need to be cognizant of that. And also, I think what people don't think about so much, but not only is diversity and their talents and their ideas, their creativity and the innovation they can bring to our society and our culture important, but they're making up, or various groups are making up, more of the buyers and sellers of housing right now. And just kind of looking at the question that you posed, I decided to go online and went to NAR. And the statistic I read there is that 40% of first-time home buyers across the country are basically non-white individuals. So,
That's kind of amazing.
well,
Immigrant population.
yeah. And we're a melting pot. We have been forever.
Right.
And that's been the benefit of America. And everybody comes here because they have a certain dream or goal. and they want to have their American dream. I feel positive about that. And so it's a matter of learning to communicate in the proper way. Again, we're getting back to communication on everything. So it's very important to our society. It's very important to us as realtors because they sustain our markets, and we need to be aware of that.
We do. We need to be aware that there are people who see the world differently than we do. That doesn't mean there should be disrespect. That should mean from us, we don't assume anything. We have to be open if we're going to stay in business, and the world is changing, to what may come our way. Whether it's cultural diversity within our own families, within the churches, within the schools, within our realtor population, we encompass an awfully lot. And to deal with that, a respect for our fellow human beings.
I think that's the most important point that's been made, is respect for each other, being kind and courteous to each other.
And not assuming that you have all the answers about the person with whom you're dealing.
Yes.
I agree. So here's kind of an interesting question. Why should you never present yourself as an expert?
And you ask the two of us, right?
Yes.
After all this conversation.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, it's obvious that, you're presenting or incurring potential legal liability, presenting yourself as an expert in all things. So, I mean, that's a given. But I think it gets down to credibility too. If I meet somebody and they seem to have the answers for everything, and they are experts, I just become a little bit leery of them. That my radar goes off, and I don't know if other people are that way or not. We're very knowledgeable in our world in real estate, but we aren't experts, and that's why we have inspectors, and that's why we have contractors to come in and take a look to verify what inspectors say. It's why we have attorneys. If somebody's backing out of a contract, advise your people, talk to their attorney about it. So I think it gets down to not only the potential exposure you're creating for yourself liability-wise, but also just the credibility you have with your clients.
I'm thinking. We all come to the table with a lot of different experiences. And those experiences in one place or another don't necessarily mean that someone else has had the same experience that we've had. There is a reason in the law that it says we should advise our clients and our customers to obtain expert advice because we don't know it all. The liability is great. It's great personally, it's great professionally, and it's great to our brokerages, the firms under which we operate. So it's important. There are people who do set themselves up as experts, and there is an answer for everything. And you and I both have run into them on the other side of the table. There are buyers and sellers who are experts, So we have to take a step back and say, all right, shall we check this out and see where it goes? Sometimes there's really nothing you can do. You have to let them move forward. But experts, we can get from A to Z in a transaction. We can do that. But there's an awfully lot. There are an awfully lot of letters in that alphabet. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, that concludes our session. Thank you so much.
Thank goodness.
You did it.
Thank you.
You did it.
Thank you.
Great information, and I learned a lot, and hopefully our membership did too. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.